All right, let's talk about Beta Garmin, a name that sends shivers down the spines of lorehounds and leaves casual fans scratching their heads. This isn't just another forgotten battle. It's the Forgotten Battle, a phantom conflict whispered about in the darkest corners of Warhammer 40,000 lore. We're talking about the Ghost War, a series of events so shrouded in secrecy that you have to wonder, were there truly battles fought here that absolutely no one remembers, or at least no one is allowed to remember? It's a tantalizing thought because, unlike so many other forgotten skirmishes, Beta Garmin feels deliberately forgotten, as if some immense power actively erased it from the collective consciousness. This isn't just about imperfect record-keeping. This is about a conspiracy on a galactic scale, making the question of remembered battles less about historical accuracy and more about the manipulation of truth itself. The first whispers of Beta Garmin truly hit home when we started digging into the Horus Heresy series, particularly as the narrative delved deeper into the machinations leading up to the Great Civil War. Before that, it was just nothing. A blank space on the galactic map, which ironically made it even more intriguing. When authors like Aaron Dembski-Bowden began to drop tantalizing hints, fans, myself included, practically pounced on them. It felt like finding a hidden message in plain sight, a secret handshake amongst the most dedicated lore masters. We'd pore over every new release, searching for any fleeting mention of Beta Garmin, Ghost War, or Malcador's agents in the same sentence. It wasn't just about reading the story anymore. It became a full-blown archaeological dig, piecing together fragments from across multiple books and supplemental materials. What truly struck me, and I think many others, was the sheer vagueness of these early references. They were almost always in passing, a character making a cryptic comment or a historical record alluding to events that were deliberately obscured. It felt less like a story being told and more like a secret being guarded. This immediately led to a surge of fan theories, as you can imagine. Was it a massive psychic attack, a secret weapon being tested, or perhaps something even more insidious, something that challenged the very foundations of the Imperium's narrative? The beauty of it was that everyone had their own wild ideas, fueled by the scarcity of information. I remember one particularly passionate discussion on a forum where someone posited it was a precursor to the Cadian Gate, a kind of psychic bleed-through from the Eye of Terror that Malcador had to contain before it engulfed the galaxy. While outlandish, it showed the depth of engagement this mystery generated. Another popular theory, which I personally found quite compelling, revolved around the possibility of an early encounter with forces that even the Emperor himself deemed too dangerous for widespread knowledge. Think about it. The Imperium is built on a very carefully curated version of history. What if Beta Garmin involved something so utterly terrifying, so existentially threatening, that the only way to prevent widespread panic or ideological collapse was to simply erase it? This could have been a rogue Xenos race of unimaginable power, a demonic incursion far worse than anything seen before, or even, and this is a chilling thought, a dark mirror of humanity's own psychic potential unleashed without control. The idea that battles were fought and lives lost, only for those sacrifices to be utterly unacknowledged, adds a layer of tragic irony to the lore. It raises the question, can a battle truly be remembered if every trace of it is purged? The fan community's role in fleshing out the Ghost War has been monumental. Because Black Library wasn't giving us explicit details, we, the fans, became the lore master detectives. We dissected every phrase, every half-sentence. We cross-referenced timelines, speculated on the motives of key figures like Malcador the Sigillite, and even tried to deduce the specific legions or factions that might have been involved. There were passionate arguments about whether it was a small, contained skirmish or a full-blown war that rivaled major heresy-era conflicts in scale, but was simply more effectively suppressed. The sheer volume of fan-generated discussion and analysis around something so nebulous was a testament to the power of a well-placed mystery in a rich fictional universe. It turned us all into amateur historians, piecing together a shattered mosaic of what might have happened, driven by the insatiable curiosity to know the truth behind the whispers. It's truly fascinating how a few enigmatic sentences can spawn so much creative energy and debate within a fan base. The vacuum of information created by those initial mentions wasn't a flaw. It was a stroke of genius. It allowed us to fill in the blanks, to project our own fears and theories onto this unseen conflict. The question, were there battles no one remembers, ceased being a simple yes-no query and became an invitation to explore the very nature of memory, censorship, and historical revisionism within the grim-dark future. We weren't just reading about a forgotten war. We were actively participating in its hypothetical reconstruction, trying to drag it back from the oblivion Malcador and his agents had seemingly condemned it to. And in doing so, we, in a way, remembered it ourselves, even if our memories were built on speculation rather than fact. Okay, if you're talking about forgotten battles, especially one as deeply buried as the Ghost War of Beta-Garmon, you absolutely have to talk about Malcador the Sigillite. This guy, the Emperor's most trusted confidant and the architect of so many shadowy Imperial institutions, is practically synonymous with galactic-level secrets. When his name comes up in connection with Beta Garmin, it's not just a casual mention. It's a flashing red light screaming, "Cover up!" To me, Malcador isn't just a character. He's the embodiment of grim necessity, the guy who makes the impossible choices so no one else has to, or even knows about them. And that, right there, is why Beta Garmin feels so chillingly real, because Malcador wouldn't just forget a battle. He would erase it completely and utterly if he deemed it necessary for the survival of humanity. The sheer scale of Malcador's involvement suggests that whatever happened on Beta Garmin wasn't just a minor skirmish. This wasn't some local planetary uprising or a forgotten Xenos raid that just slipped through the cracks of Imperial bureaucracy. No, for Malcador to personally oversee the suppression of information, the wiping of records, and the silencing of witnesses, it had to be something of monumental importance, something that truly threatened the very fabric of the nascent Imperium. My personal theory is that it challenged the Emperor's narrative or exposed a vulnerability that the nascent Imperium simply couldn't afford to acknowledge. Maybe it was a psychic plague that almost consumed a legion, or a weapon so terrifying it couldn't be allowed to exist in public knowledge. Fans often speculate that it involved some kind of deep warp corruption, or a horrifying new form of Xenos life that could infect minds or souls, something so alien it defied Imperial understanding. The thought that Malcador, a man of incredible psychic power and intellect, felt compelled to expunge it speaks volumes about its danger. One of the most fascinating aspects of Malcador's role in this whole affair is the sheer ruthlessness implied. We're not just talking about filing away some confidential documents, we're talking about systematic eradication of evidence. That means silencing anyone who knew too much, probably even those who fought there. Imagine being a soldier on Beta Garmin, surviving horrors beyond comprehension, only to be told that your sacrifice, your very presence, never happened, that your comrades died for a cause that officially doesn't exist. It's a level of psychological warfare that's truly disturbing. This leads to the haunting question: how many nameless heroes were buried on Beta Garmin, their deeds forever unremembered, their very existence redacted? And how many innocent bystanders or even witnesses were disappeared to maintain the secrecy? It paints a picture of Malcador not as a benevolent protector, but as a cold, calculating instrument of Imperial will, willing to pay any price for the greater good, even if that price was truth and memory. The fan community has really leaned into this idea of Malcador as the ultimate fixer. Discussions often revolve around the moral implications of his actions. Was he justified? Did the potential fallout from whatever happened on Beta Garmin truly warrant such extreme measures? Many argue that, in the brutal reality of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, such actions were sadly necessary to maintain unity and prevent widespread panic. Others contend that such censorship, even with good intentions, sets a dangerous precedent for the future Imperium, leading to the dogmatic and truth-averse bureaucracy we see in 40,000. It's a classic ends justify the means dilemma, but on a cosmic scale. My take? Malcador genuinely believed he was saving humanity, and given the existential threats they faced, he probably was. But that doesn't make the cost any less horrific, or the act of erasing history any less chilling. Ultimately, Malcador's shadow looms large over the Ghost War. His fingerprints are all over the missing data, the cryptic illusions, and the profound sense of something terrible being deliberately buried. He is the reason we even know that something happened, even if we don't know what. His very involvement tells us that Beta-Garmon wasn't just a battle, but the battle that the Imperium absolutely could not allow to be remembered, not by its citizens, not by its historians, and perhaps not even by the Emperor himself. It's a testament to his power and influence that even millennia later, the secret holds, leaving us to forever speculate on the horrors he chose to bury beneath the layers of forgotten history. So if Malcador is the master of secrets, what kind of secret would require such extreme measures? This brings us to one of the most compelling and terrifying theories about Beta-Garmon, a psychic catastrophe. When we talk about battles no one remembers, the idea of a psychic scourge makes perfect, horrifying sense. Think about it. Conventional warfare leaves craters, ruins, bodies. Psychic warfare, especially on a catastrophic scale, can leave nothing but shattered minds, erased memories, and a chilling void. It's the ultimate clean slate, a battle fought beyond the veil of physical reality, making its deliberate forgetting all the more plausible. The notion of a psychic scourge at Beta-Garmon is far more than just a fan theory. It's practically canon, subtly woven into the lore through mentions of psychic storms and astropathic silence. This isn't just about a few rogue psychers causing trouble. We're talking about something on a planetary or even system-wide scale, a maelstrom of raw, uncontrolled psychic energy. My gut feeling, and it's a shared one among many fans, is that Beta-Garmon was a testing ground, or perhaps a focal point, for some of the Imperium's earliest and most dangerous encounters with uncontrolled warp phenomena before the advent of the Astronomicon and the more standardized control of psychers. Imagine the early Great Crusade, still figuring out the true dangers of the warp, running headlong into a horror they simply weren't prepared for. It's a terrifying thought, an enemy that can't be fought with bolters or chainswords, but with the very fabric of reality itself. The impact of such an event would have been catastrophic, not just physically, but existentially. If the battles fought on Beta-Garmon were primarily psychic, then the casualties might not have been conventional deaths. Instead, we could be talking about souls devoured, minds shattered beyond repair, or entire populations driven to madness. This level of psychic devastation would leave no conventional historical markers, no physical evidence of a struggle, only silence and a pervasive sense of dread. For Malcador, who was acutely aware of the dangers of uncontrolled psychic power and the warp, this kind of threat would be paramount. He saw the potential for humanity to destroy itself from within, long before the heresy truly began to unravel. Erasing Beta-Garmon would be less about hiding a military defeat and more about suppressing a terrifying truth about humanity's vulnerability to the immaterial. Fan discussions around this point often highlight the sheer implications of such an event. What kind of entity could unleash such a psychic maelstrom? Was it an ancient Xenos race specifically designed to wage war on the psychic plane? Or was it an unforeseen consequence of humanity's own burgeoning psychic potential, perhaps a failed experiment or a rogue psyker cult that went spectacularly, horrifyingly wrong? Some theories even suggest it was an early manifestation of chaos, a precursor to the demonic incursions that would plague the heresy, forcing the Emperor and Malcador to realize the true nature of the enemy they faced. The idea that this ghost war was fought not against flesh and blood, but against entities of pure malevolent thought and emotion makes the question of remembered battles profoundly sad. How do you remember a battle that takes place in the mind? A conflict where the very concept of memory is the target. The lingering impact of a psychic scourge also speaks to why the secrets of Beta Garmin persist. If minds were wiped, if collective memories were erased, then there truly are battles that no one remembers, not because of censorship of records, but because the very capacity to remember them was destroyed. It's a more insidious, more complete form of historical revisionism. This leads us to consider the survivors, if any. Were they purged? Or were they left as traumatized shells, their minds blank slates, living proof that the Emperor's chosen ones were not invincible, that even their psyches could be utterly undone by the horrors of the void? The psychic scourge theory isn't just a grim hypothesis. It explains how such a significant event could vanish so completely, making the notion of forgotten battles less a matter of oversight and more a chilling testament to a profound psychic trauma that the Imperium sought to bury forever. When you talk about secrets, especially in the context of the Horus Heresy and a battle that seemingly vanished without a trace, one legion always comes to mind: the Alpha Legion. These guys are the masters of infiltration, misdirection, and making things disappear, including themselves. So it's almost an instinctive leap for any fan to immediately wonder if the Alpha Legion had a hand in the Beta Garmin situation, either orchestrating the initial disaster, cleaning up the mess, or perhaps even being the victims themselves. The very nature of the Ghost War feels like something ripped straight out of their playbook, a perfectly executed operation of obfuscation. However, and this is where it gets interesting, the prevailing fan sentiment and what little lore we have suggests the Alpha Legion's direct involvement in the Beta Garmin event itself is surprisingly minimal or non-existent in the way many initially assume. This isn't to say they weren't aware of it, or perhaps even learned from it later, but the core events of Beta Garmin seem to precede their full emergence as the galaxy's premier manipulators, or at least precede the kind of pervasive overt involvement we see them have in other shadowy affairs. This, in itself, is a fascinating point of discussion amongst us fans. Why wouldn't the Alpha Legion be involved in the ultimate secret war? It almost feels wrong. The lack of concrete Alpha Legion involvement actually strengthens the mystery of Beta Garmin for me. If even the Alpha Legion wasn't pulling the strings, or at least wasn't the primary antagonist, it suggests something far more fundamental, far more terrifying, was at play. Perhaps the forces at Beta Garmin were too chaotic, too unmanageable even for their intricate plans. Or maybe, and this is a thought that gives me chills, the event was so inherently anti-information that even the Alpha Legion, who thrive on information control, couldn't fully comprehend or exploit it. It raises the stakes significantly. If the most secretive Legion is on the sidelines, then whatever happened was truly beyond the conventional understanding of warfare and espionage. Of course, this doesn't stop the fan theories from exploring more nuanced roles for the Alpha Legion. Some suggest they were covertly observing the events on Beta Garmin, learning from Malcador's methods of information suppression for their own future operations. Others speculate that perhaps a small cell was involved, but their actions were so perfectly hidden that even their own Legion might not have been fully aware of it, which is peak Alpha Legion. There are also theories that they may have been tasked by Malcador himself to help clean up the mess and ensure the secret remained buried, leveraging their unique skills in misdirection. This kind of negative space storytelling, where the absence of a faction tells a story, is incredibly engaging for lore enthusiasts. The fact that the Alpha Legion isn't typically cited as a primary player in the Beta Garmin narrative fundamentally shifts the answer to, were there battles no one remembers? Away from the idea of deliberate tactical erasure by a manipulative force, and more towards something so inherently destructive to memory that even those who specialize in secrets couldn't fully contain it. It means the ghost aspect of the Ghost War isn't just about a cover-up. It's about a fundamental disruption to knowledge itself. So while my initial instinct is always to blame the Alpha Legion for anything mysterious, in the case of Beta Garmin, their relative absence makes the truth, whatever it may be, even more profoundly unsettling, and elevates the nature of the forgotten conflict to something truly unique in the sprawling tapestry of the Horus heresy. So we've talked about Malcador, the master of secrets, and the terrifying psychic nature of the Ghost War. But let's zoom out for a second. Who does Malcador serve? Who is the ultimate orchestrator of galactic-level plans, even the ones he keeps secret from almost everyone? The Emperor. This immediately brings us to a chilling, yet incredibly compelling fan theory. Beta Garmin wasn't just a disaster Malcador reacted to, but possibly an event, or at least its subsequent cover-up, that was part of the Emperor's larger hidden agenda. The idea that battles were fought and forgotten, not just out of necessity, but as a deliberate component of some grand, inscrutable scheme, adds a layer of cosmic chess to the tragedy. The Emperor is, to put it mildly, a being of unimaginable foresight and often ruthless pragmatism. He operates on a scale of centuries, even millennia, with plans so intricate that even his most loyal sons struggle to comprehend them. So, when something as profoundly unsettling as the Beta Garmin incident occurs, and is then so completely erased, it's hard not to connect it to the Emperor's overarching ambitions for humanity. Was Beta Garmin a controlled experiment gone awry? A necessary sacrifice for a greater gain? Or perhaps most disturbingly, a test of Malcador's loyalty and capabilities in handling inconvenient truths? Many fans, myself included, lean towards the idea that Beta Garmin served a purpose beyond just being a singular, isolated horror. It felt too perfectly concealed, too efficiently swept under the rug to be purely accidental. Consider the context. The Great Crusade was about unifying humanity and bringing enlightenment, but it was also about establishing a dominion where psychic power was controlled and the dangers of the warp were understood, or at least contained. If Beta Garmin was indeed a massive psychic catastrophe, as many believe, then it could have been an early brutal lesson for the Emperor and Malcador about the true unbridled destructive potential of the warp. It might have solidified the Emperor's resolve to build the Golden Throne, to forge the Astronomicon, or to severely restrict unregulated psychic ability. In this light, the forgotten battles of Beta Garmin weren't just casualties of war, but critical data points, horrifying case studies that shaped the very future of the Imperium's psychic policies. The memory of these battles had to be forgotten, not just to prevent panic, but to prevent the wrong lessons from being drawn, or to ensure that the Imperium's new controlled approach to psychers was seen as the only path. Fan discussions frequently touch on the Emperor's Machiavellian tendencies. Was Beta Garmin a deliberate pruning exercise, eliminating elements of humanity or nascent psychic abilities that didn't fit his grand design? Some theories suggest it could have involved a very early form of the Webway project, a catastrophic failure that needed to be completely erased to protect the secrecy of the project itself. The idea that soldiers, custodians, or even early Astartes were deployed to Beta Garmin not just to fight an enemy, but to be sacrificed for an ultimate, unseen purpose is a dark but compelling thought. It transforms the question, were there battles no one remembers, into, were there battles designed to be forgotten, their purpose serving a higher unseen hand? The echoes of Beta Garmin, even as they remain elusive, suggest a profound impact on the Emperor's strategies. It reinforces the grim reality that in the 41st millennium, the truth is often a luxury, and knowledge is a weapon. The very fact that Beta Garmin is so deeply buried implies that the lessons learned there were far too dangerous for the average citizen, or even the average space marine, to comprehend. It tells us that the Emperor, for all his benevolence, was not above extreme measures to ensure humanity's survival, even if it meant sacrificing entire memories, entire conflicts, to the void of forgotten history. This makes Beta Garmin not just a single, isolated incident, but a ghost that haunts the very foundations of the Imperium, a silent testament to the terrifying lengths to which its master was willing to go. When we talk about forgotten battles, especially one like Beta Garmin, It's not just about missing records or vague illusions. It's about the profound human or superhuman cost behind that silence. The more I think about the Ghost War, the more I'm struck by the sheer scale of sacrifice involved, not just in terms of lives lost, but in terms of identity, memory, and even the very notion of historical truth. Were there battles no one remembers? Absolutely. And that very forgetting is perhaps the most tragic sacrifice of all. Imagine fighting and dying for the Imperium, believing in its cause, only for your final moments, your entire contribution, to be deliberately wiped from existence. It's a chilling thought that resonates deeply with the grimdark nature of the 41st millennium. This isn't merely about soldiers dying in the Emperor's name. It's about their sacrifice being rendered utterly meaningless in the historical record. Their deeds, their heroism, their suffering, all expunged. For me, this is where Beta Garmin truly hits hard. We've seen countless examples of the Imperium's cruelty and pragmatism, but the erasure of an entire conflict, complete with its participants, elevates it to a new level of cold, calculating sacrifice. Fan discussions often ponder the specific legions or Imperial army regiments that might have been deployed there. Were they the unlucky ones, chosen for a mission so sensitive that their very existence became a liability? The idea that entire companies or even chapters of Space Marines, legendary warriors who would normally be immortalized in sagas, simply vanished into the ether is deeply unsettling. It speaks to a threat so profound that conventional honors and remembrance were secondary to maintaining absolute secrecy. The cost of silence extends beyond just the direct combatants. What about the logistical personnel, the astropaths, the fleet crews, even the Imperial citizens who might have witnessed something? If Malcador truly oversaw this cover-up, then his methods would have been thorough and ruthless. This implies not just a purging of documents, but potentially a purging of minds, or worse, individuals themselves. Think about the implications for the few survivors, if any. Were they subjected to memory wipes, re-education, or simply executed to ensure the secret held? The possibility that living beings walked away from Beta Garmin with their experiences surgically removed, leaving them with a gaping hole where traumatic memories should be, is a horrifying thought. It's a different kind of wound, one that festers in the soul, even if the individual is unaware of its source. This level of enforced oblivion also affects the wider Imperial narrative. The Imperium constantly preaches about sacrifice and glorious death for the Emperor. Yet here we have an instance where sacrifice is not only unacknowledged, but actively denied. It creates a subtle but pervasive lie at the heart of their historical dogma. My fellow fans and I often discuss how this kind of deliberate erasure contributes to the decaying, cynical nature of the Imperium in 40,000. If the very founders were willing to bury such immense truths, then what other lies fester beneath the surface? It makes you question everything, making the grimdark even grimmer. The battles of Beta Garmin might be forgotten, but their non-remembrance casts a long, chilling shadow over the Imperium's integrity. In essence, the Ghost War of Beta Garmin isn't just about a hidden conflict. It's a profound statement on the nature of truth and sacrifice in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The battles fought there might be unknown to the Imperium at large, but the very act of their suppression reveals a terrifying cost. It tells us that some truths are deemed too dangerous, some sacrifices too inconvenient to ever see the light of day. And in that enforced silence, the lost lives, the unremembered deeds, and the vanished memories become a haunting testament to the brutal efficiency of Malcador's will and the Emperor's grand, often terrifying vision. The forgotten battles of Beta Garmin are remembered by no one because the price of that silence was absolute. One of the core tenets of understanding the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and especially mysteries like the Ghost War of Beta Garmin, is acknowledging that Imperial records are, to put it mildly, deeply unreliable. We're not talking about a little historical bias or a few missing documents. We're talking about a vast, sprawling bureaucracy that has systematically rewritten, lost, or outright suppressed information for 10,000 years. So when we ask, were there battles no one remembers? The answer is almost certainly yes, not just because of specific deliberate cover-ups like Beta-Garmon, but because the very nature of Imperial record-keeping makes accurate historical recollection a near impossibility. It's a terrifying thought that the truth is so fragile. Think about it. The Imperium doesn't just have a poor memory, it has a hostile relationship with truth, especially inconvenient truth. Heresy is everywhere, and even a slightly unorthodox interpretation of history can lead to dire consequences. Scribes painstakingly copy and recopy texts, often introducing errors or deliberate alterations. Data slates degrade. Warp storms cut off communication for centuries. And then there are the vast, unknowable archives where records are simply lost to the sheer scale of the administrative nightmare. So, while Malcador's direct hand in Beta-Garmon's erasure makes it unique, it also highlights a broader systemic issue. How many other ghost wars exist, not because of a grand conspiracy, but because the Imperium's memory is simply broken? This is a question I've pondered endlessly with other fans, and it makes the entire lore feel so much deeper and more tragic. This pervasive unreliability means that anything we read in a Horus Heresy novel or even a 40,000 codex should be taken with a grain of salt. It's often presented as Imperial perspective or in-universe account, which immediately flags it as potentially skewed. This is a brilliant narrative device by the Black Library authors because it allows for immense flexibility and constant reinterpretation. It also means that when a specific event is mentioned as being deliberately expunged, like Beta-Garmon, it carries even more weight. It's not just a general problem of poor records, it's a targeted deletion, confirming that something truly extraordinary and dangerous happened. The sheer effort required to scrub something so completely suggests a truth far more devastating than mere defeat. Fan theories thrive in this environment of unreliable narration. For Beta-Garmon, it allows us to speculate wildly. Was the narrative of the Horus Heresy itself slightly altered to account for the absence of Beta-Garmon's impact? Were heroes from that conflict simply reassigned to other, more palatable battlefields in the official histories? The idea that entire characters or units could have existed, fought, and died, only to be completely erased from all public-facing records is terrifyingly plausible within the Warhammer 40,000 setting. It means that the truth we get as readers is only a sliver of the actual, messy, and often horrific reality of the Imperium's past. Ultimately, Beta-Garmon is the poster child for Imperial historical revisionism, but it's important to remember it's just one extreme example of a much larger, more pervasive issue. The answer to whether battles are forgotten is a resounding yes, not only due to deliberate actions like Malcador's, but also because the very nature of the Imperium's administrative apparatus makes true historical fidelity impossible. It's a universe where history isn't just written by the victors. It's meticulously sculpted, distorted, and frequently incinerated to serve the current narrative, leaving countless untold stories and unremembered sacrifices in its wake. The moment you hear about something being deliberately hidden in Warhammer 40,000 lore, especially something as grand as a ghost war, your mind immediately jumps to conspiracy theories. Beta-Garmon is fertile ground for them, a massive, uncultivated field of unanswered questions just begging for fan speculation to take root. The sheer lack of information isn't a bug. It's a feature, a blank canvas upon which we, the lore enthusiasts, can paint our wildest theories. Were there battles no one remembers? Absolutely, and the reasons for that forgetting are where the real fun and fear begins. The core unanswered question, the one that keeps me up at night sometimes, is, what exactly happened on Beta-Garmon? The psychic scourge theory is strong, but was it a Xenos attack, a demonic incursion, or something even more insidious, something from within humanity itself? Some fan theories suggest it was an early manifestation of the Oblivion Knights, an experiment in anti-psyker warfare that went horribly wrong, consuming everything it touched. Others posit that it was a trial run for the Emperor's Grand Webway project, a catastrophic failure that threatened to unravel reality itself, necessitating a complete memory wipe across all affected parties. The beauty of these theories is that they're all equally plausible in a setting as grim and secretive as the Imperium. One of the most intriguing conspiracy threads revolves around the purpose of the silence. It's not just about hiding a failure, it's about protecting a larger truth or a lie. Did the Emperor and Malcador use Beta-Garmon as a test case for their ability to control information on a galactic scale? Was it a dry run for the kinds of deceptions they would need to pull off during the Horus Heresy? Imagine the cold, calculating nature of that. A full-scale conflict with real casualties used as an information control exercise. That would make the forgotten battles of Beta-Garmon not just tragic, but profoundly cynical, a horrifying testament to the lengths the Imperial leadership would go to maintain their narrative. Then there's the question of who else knew. If Malcador was the architect, were there other high-ranking individuals privy to the truth? Did some of the Primarchs have fragmented memories, or perhaps an unsettling sense of something missing from their past experiences? This leads to fan theories that connect Beta-Garmon to the enigmatic nature of certain legions, perhaps hinting at why some were more prone to secrecy or even outright deception. Could the White Scar's nomadic nature or the Raven Guard's shadowy tactics have been partly influenced by echoes of this forgotten conflict, lessons learned by their Primarchs from a source they could never reveal? The very existence of Beta-Garmon's ghost implies a profound web of lies woven at the very foundation of the Imperium. It tells us that the reality presented to the common citizen, and even to many high-ranking officials, is a carefully constructed facade. The unanswered questions surrounding Beta-Garmon are not just academic. They speak to the fundamental nature of truth in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. They challenge us to look beyond the official narratives and consider the terrifying possibilities that lie hidden beneath layers of censorship and forgotten history. The fact that Beta-Garmon remains such a tantalizing mystery, even after so many years, is a testament to the power of a well-placed secret, and the enduring question of how many other battles have been fought and entirely forgotten for reasons we may never truly comprehend. Even with Malcador's best efforts and the Imperium's naturally terrible record-keeping, a truth as potent as the ghost war of Beta-Garmon can't be completely buried. It's like a persistent echo, a faint signal in the void. For us, the fans, part of the thrill of this mystery is sifting through the vast, often contradictory lore to unearth those tiny, tantalizing clues that confirm its existence and hint at its nature. It's a bit like being a digital archaeologist, painstakingly brushing away layers of narrative dust to find that one little shard that fits into a much larger, unseen mosaic. And yes, these clues absolutely confirm that there were battles so thoroughly forgotten, their unearthing becomes a triumph for us lore divers. The most significant glimmer of truth came, undoubtedly, with the release of the Horus Heresy books, particularly those focusing on Malcador and the initial stages of the Civil War. Before that, Beta-Garmon was barely a whisper. But then, as the narrative peeled back layers of Imperial history, direct references to events on Beta-Garmon and Malcador's secret campaigns started appearing. These weren't overt explanations, mind you, but rather cryptic mentions by characters who should know, characters like Malcador himself or the Emperor. When they allude to something so grave, it must remain hidden. You know it's a big deal. For example, specific dialogues referencing psychic interference and the need for extreme measures to contain certain threats from that era directly point to Beta-Garmon without naming it outright as the focus of a war, solidifying the psychic catastrophe theory. Beyond explicit mentions, we find clues in the subtle shifts in Imperial policy or the Emperor's behavior. The increasingly severe restrictions on psychers, the urgency with which the Astronomicon was developed, and the Emperor's growing focus on projects like the Webway project all seem to align with the idea of a catastrophic event like Beta-Garmon serving as a brutal wake-up call. It's like connecting dots across a sprawling canvas, where one detail here, seemingly unrelated, suddenly makes perfect sense when viewed through the lens of a devastating, unremembered conflict. Many fans, myself included, have spent hours dissecting these seemingly disparate pieces of lore, trying to construct a coherent timeline of what might have happened. Another fascinating source of clues comes from the unreliable narrators themselves. Sometimes a character will briefly recall a hazy, disturbing memory, or a fragment of a report that was clearly censored. These aren't direct revelations, but rather hints at something profound being missing. It's the negative space that defines the picture. For instance, the sheer number of references to powerful, pre-heresy psychic phenomena and the Imperium's subsequent efforts to control or suppress them strongly imply a significant negative originating event. Beta-Garmon perfectly fits that bill, acting as the unseen trauma that shaped so much of the Imperium's later dogma and fear of the uncontrolled warp. The collective efforts of the fan community have been crucial in unearthing these glimmers of truth. We share observations, cross-reference minute details from dozens of books, and debate interpretations of vague passages. It's through this collaborative effort that the scattered crumbs of information coalesce into a more substantial, albeit still speculative, understanding of Beta-Garmon. These small clues, far from fully explaining the Ghost War, serve to confirm its existence, deepen its mystery, and provide just enough insight to fuel our imaginations. They assure us that yes, there were indeed battles so terrible that they were wiped from memory, but the very act of their erasure left faint, unignorable echoes in the lore, whispers of a truth that even Malcador couldn't completely silence. Despite all our digging, all the theories, and all the tantalizing glimpses in the lore, the Ghost War of Beta-Garmon remains profoundly, stubbornly obscure. This isn't an accident. It's by design, and that's precisely why it continues to captivate us. The enduring mystery of Beta-Garmon, the fact that it remains a battle no one truly remembers in detail, is a testament to the effectiveness of Malcador's machinations and the sheer scale of the threat it must have represented. It's like a phantom limb of Imperial history, aching with a memory that isn't quite there, and that ambiguity is what makes it so powerful. Why does it remain so shrouded in secrecy? The primary reason, in my opinion, and that of many fans, is the nature of the threat itself. If Beta-Garmon truly involved a catastrophic psychic event, or a horrifying warp incursion that nearly broke reality, then the truth would be far more damaging than any lie. Imagine the panic, the existential dread, if the Imperium's citizens knew that even the Emperor's mightiest warriors could be utterly obliterated by an unseen metaphysical foe. The fear of uncontrolled psychic power and the warp is a cornerstone of Imperial dogma in the 41st millennium, and Beta-Garmon serves as the unseen, terrifying foundation for that fear. The battles were forgotten, because remembering them would threaten the very sanity of the Imperium. Another key reason for its continued obscurity lies in the sheer ruthlessness of Malcador's cover-up. This wasn't just a bureaucratic error, it was a targeted, absolute eradication of information. We're talking about a level of historical revisionism that even the most meticulous historians would struggle to combat. Malcador had the power, the resources, and the unflinching will to ensure that Beta-Garmon simply ceased to exist in the collective memory. He didn't just hide documents. He likely purged individuals, corrupted data streams, and ensured that any first-hand accounts were silenced. This level of intentional deletion is incredibly hard to reverse, even by diligent lore masters centuries later. It truly makes it a battle no one remembers, because the remembrance itself was the target. Furthermore, the obscurity is maintained by the narrative structure of Warhammer 40,000 itself. The authors at Black Library understand the power of a good mystery. Beta-Garmon serves as a narrative black hole, drawing in speculation and giving depth to the universe without requiring a full, definitive explanation. If they fully revealed Beta Garmin, it might diminish its impact. Its power lies in what we don't know, in the terrifying possibilities that remain tantalizingly out of reach. This allows for ongoing fan engagement, constant theorizing, and the perpetual sense that there's always more to uncover in the grimdark future. The fact that Beta Garmin remains an enigma, despite years of new lore and deeper dives into the Horus heresy, also speaks to its strategic importance within the broader narrative. It represents a fundamental horror, a foundational trauma that shaped the Imperium without ever having to explicitly detail it. It reinforces the theme that the Imperium is built on secrets, lies, and forgotten atrocities, making its very existence a tragic triumph. So, when we ask if there were battles no one remembers, Beta Garmin stands as the ultimate example, a silent, terrifying testament to the lengths the Imperium will go to bury the most inconvenient and terrifying truths. Its enduring mystery is not a flaw, but a chilling strength of the lore. So after all this talk about the ghost war of Beta Garmin, the psychic scourge, Malcador's secrets, and the unreliable nature of Imperial records, we come to the most profound question of all. Do these forgotten battles still matter? If no one remembers them, if their existence has been systematically expunged, what real impact do they have on the 41st millennium, or even on our understanding of the Horus heresy? For me, and I think for many dedicated fans, the answer is an emphatic yes, they absolutely do. These forgotten conflicts are not just narrative quirks. They are chilling foundational elements that shape the very universe we love. Firstly, even if the specifics are forgotten, the consequences of Beta Garmin are undeniably present. The Imperium's extreme fear of psychers, its rigid adherence to the priesthood of Terra's dogma, and the very existence of institutions like the Inquisition and the Astra Telepathica all feel like direct, albeit unacknowledged, responses to events like the Ghost War. Beta Garmin, as an unseen trauma, likely reinforced the Emperor's conviction that humanity needed strict control over its psychic potential and a clear, unwavering path dictated by him. So, while the battles themselves are not remembered, their shadow profoundly influenced the course of Imperial history, leading to the grimdark reality we see 10 millennia later. It's a chilling thought that the entire fate of humanity might have been altered by a series of events so terrible they had to be erased from memory. Secondly, the very act of forgetting Beta Garmin is a powerful statement about the nature of the Imperium. It reveals a deeply cynical core, a willingness to sacrifice truth and memory for what is perceived as the greater good. This isn't just a fantasy universe. It's a commentary on totalitarian regimes and the manipulation of history. The fact that an entire war, with countless sacrifices, can be rendered non-existent by the will of a few powerful individuals speaks volumes about the fragility of truth and the power of narrative control within the setting. For us, the readers, understanding that such a thing could happen makes the Imperium even more terrifying and its grim darkness even more palpable. It forces us to question every piece of lore we encounter, to look for the hidden threads and the suppressed truths. Thirdly, from a storytelling perspective, Beta Garmin's obscurity makes it incredibly compelling. It's a perpetual source of fan theories, speculation, and creative exploration. It allows us to participate in the lore, to piece together clues, and to imagine the unimaginable. If every mystery were solved, if every battle were explicitly detailed, the Warhammer 40,000 universe would lose some of its allure. The unknown, the deliberately forgotten, acts as a narrative hook, drawing us deeper into its mysteries. The question of whether battles are remembered isn't just about historical facts. It's about the very fabric of the story and the enduring power of a well-kept secret. So yes, the forgotten battles of Beta Garmin absolutely still matter. They matter because their consequences echo through the millennia, shaping the Imperium. They matter because they reveal the brutal, pragmatic nature of its founders, And they matter because they continue to fuel our imagination, prompting us to ask deeper questions about truth, memory, and sacrifice in a universe that constantly reminds us of the horrors that lie just beyond the veil of understanding. Beta Garmin is a ghost, yes, but it is a ghost that haunts the entire saga, a chilling reminder that some truths are too terrible to ever be remembered, and yet they cast an undeniable shadow over everything that came after. If you've enjoyed this dive into the ghostly echoes of Beta Garmin, please consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the cryptic lore of Warhammer 40,000. Hit that like button if you found this exploration as fascinating as I did, and leave a comment below with your theories about what truly happened in the Ghost War. Did I miss a crucial clue? Do you have an even wilder conspiracy theory? Let's keep this conversation going, because in the grim dark future, even forgotten battles demand to be discussed.